Now, Jerry, now!
What? What now? Now it's on television now, me? What now? It's you? Well, then I haven't got a coat or a tie. Wait a second, don't move nothing. Wait, I'll get a coat. Don't run. What now? I'm on, yeah?
Lights, camera, action. Hello everyone, welcome back to Film2Table, and today we are going to interview our second guest for the project. This is Anthony Ng. He is a British, Chinese, Canadian producer and composer talking to me all the way in England. Thank you for being here, Anthony. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. I'm not bad, thank you very much.
Okay, great. So let's just dive into the very first question.
I guess it was a little bit accidental. I was very into like creative stuff, I guess, like a lot of music as well. And I would sometimes do these projects with friends and things like this. And yeah, whether it's like making songs or stupid videos or whatever, like so that's kind of I would say like the nub of it. And then but I didn't do it at school or anything. I did philosophy, but one of my friends uh was working as a film writer at that time, and he asked me if I wanted to be involved in a project he was getting off the ground, and that was the first film I was really involved in, other than short things before that. But you know, amateur. So he got me on as a producer. I didn't really know what a film producer did. I'm still not 100% sure what a film producer does. A lot of different things, I think, is the
Yeah.
answer to that, and it really depends on a project to project basis. By that point, my primary interest was music, and I was interested in doing music for film as well, and I still am.
I know you mentioned you studied philosophy. Do you still think that what you learned in college you apply to film in some ways?
I think about this quite a bit because like I think definitely the things that interest me in film are tend to have a philosophical backdrop or themes, or like I think that's that's definitely something that just yeah is an interest of mine. And so because film is, you know, can represent so many different, as an art form it can represent so many different things. The analytical way it helped me think in terms of what I actually learned, or the philosophers and all that stuff, I've probably more or less forgotten all of it. I did do a film module. You could do these extra modules that weren't to do with your course. I did one on film, and I actually saw a lot of interesting things around that time. But I was already I was already very interested in film at that point, and so I was also watching a lot as a student, just on my own time, and that, I mean, it's funny, like a lot of those films, I do think when you're in your like early 20s or around that time, stuff does, you do go back to it quite a lot in your head. Like the things it shapes a little bit the kind of things you gravitate towards if you're watching a lot of different things.
Was thinking that I wanted to major in film, but also like have a minor in something else that I'm also, interested in. I do love history, so I think, having that other knowledge can help me elevate my own films and what I want to create.
I think it's important because these are meant to reflect a lot of other things in life. I think it's really good to have people who aren't just entirely focused on the medium, because then you maybe end up with these more generic or like paint by numbers way of doing things, because everything's just about what came before and it kind of eats itself, you know. And history is like a great thing because it's like, you know, so much of what I work on now or with archive films or is looking over history, and with Jill it's all there's an element of that, of course. I think there's definitely recurring themes. I think that more comes from um the element of our work, and I say our because I run this production company with two other people, and I think a lot of the work we tend to have done at this time, there are overlapping elements of this. The idea of kind of with archive film and sampling and bringing in existing material, um, that is that is a recurrent thing, which I think originally came out of necessity in a way of being able to do things for relatively cheap, um, and and also for me, with my having done sort of a lot of at university, doing a lot of like music sampling, I there was an overlap with that as well, where it was kind of like a sensibility to use existing material in that way, and I think that's that's a field I definitely feel comfortable in. And I think even like with the gallery, which doesn't on the surface look like it's doing that, apart from I guess the paintings and things that are in it. The script of that is it's just taking the form of an audition and then sort of twisting it and turning it, and it's like that is kind of an existing thing. There's a form to that that's there, and you're taking. And with Day After Day, the start of that was literally just that I think I came up with the idea of wanting to have like a character move through their filmography or the things they've been in. And I'd realized that I'd never seen a Doris Day film, and I came across kind of, and I looked at her filmography and I was like, it's so weird. She did all these films and then it stopped suddenly. And so it just like I just went down the rabbit hole with that. I was just told myself, oh, I'm going to watch every single Doris Day film. I'm going to, and I think these rules, I think these limitations are very appealing to me. It gives a kind of high concept thing that your framework to work within, and then, you just kind of, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to have to watch all these. I'm going to have to like find something in it, and then I'm going to have to create something out of it. And I think with all the possible things you can create, with all the different, it gives you a space that stops it being so overwhelming, those limitations. I have a folder of ideas that I've bookmarked as potential. I've got a good example. This is something I'm almost certainly not going to do now, but I was fixed on for a very long time. Something called choreomania, or dancing fever. It was a Wikipedia page I got sort of obsessed with. It was a plague over about 200 years, around the 1500s times. There were a lot of separate isolated incidents of people uncontrollably dancing, and then that spreading and more people uncontrollably dancing. And no one really knew exactly what caused it, or whether it was like a psychological reaction to like the poverty of the time, or like but there were all these aspects of it that are really interesting. A Wikipedia page, I don't know if it's maybe become just a Wikipedia page for one particular event for that, because there was a famous one in 1518 that's got a whole sort of story about who started it, and how, how many people died and stuff, like while they were dancing. It's just insane, and I just for a long time wanted to do something around that. It felt like it started to be discovered a bit, this Wikipedia page, or people's interest grew, and actually Jonathan Glazer did a short over the pandemic, sort of related to it. By that point, I was kind of like, I'm probably done with this idea. A true crime documentary or critique on true crime sort of art film project is one I'm producing, which my collaborator Charlie Shackleton is directing and currently editing, and that's coming together really well. I think at the moment there's a full cut, and we had a meeting recently about it, and he's very clear-headed, I think, about what changes he wants to make, and yeah, hopefully, I mean, because we're not aiming for any festivals very soon, it'll probably be quite a while before we actually like completely finalize it and push it forward. But that's in a very good place, basically. And then the other project, I'm currently in sort of early development with. I've optioned the book and I'm just working on the screenplay at the moment. And I'm working on that with an author who's based in Paris as well. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, in fact, like there's a few snatches of dialogue in the film, a little before that and a little at the end, but that that one with the nurse scene was the first one I put together. It was one of the earliest sequences I put together when I still wasn't really 100% sure what kind of form the film would take. I mean, one of the rules I set for myself with using snatches of dialogue were that they would be in scenes that Jill is in, because that's how I'd sorted all the footage anyway. I just had all these clips of her, and I would dive in, and that was a scene where she was being taught essentially how to be a nurse.
Yeah.
And yeah, it did feel like it reflected these kind of this service work, this kind of unseen labor, the skills involved. There were parallels, you know. So yeah, definitely that was like intentional. But I think I probably wasn't. I think when you are in the edit and you're like trying to be creative and move these things around, you're maybe not consciously like going like, this means this, so therefore this, you know, like I think it's more in that in those moments you're just like that feels right there, that feels right there. And then I think maybe in the later stages of the edit, the logic starts to come into it and make sense. And it might be that there was another bit that I put together, which was like, oh, this might be something. And then I'd be like, now that I'm this far along, that bit doesn't work. Like, or now that I'm thinking about it logically, that doesn't work. So I take that out. So it's like, it's sort of a filtering process, I think, where like you don't start off super clear-headed necessarily, but through keeping some things and getting rid of others, you sort of refine what you have. But that did, yeah, so that was refined and that stayed there after a while, but it was a very early thing that I put together when I didn't really know what I was making.
Yeah. It was kind of just like you had this idea and you kind of were just letting it flow and see where it would go, right? And then you would, through the editing process, that's where you kind of like really was kind of on this journey to discover how you're going to put the pieces together.
I had interviewed Jill, like I had been trying to do it a different way for a while, and I'm pretty sure that by the time I did the nurses section, yeah. So I had done some other things with the structure that I put together that had been loosely based around conversations I'd had with Jill, and some of that stuff kind of stayed in structurally. But I think I remember the nurses sequence and stuff was when I'd first given myself license to let go of trying to use the interview in that way and embrace her performances and kind of what the footage was saying and kind of just diving in. So I remember that kind of being a turning point at that stage, yeah. The research process was really long. Jill gave me a list of all the jobs she'd worked, which was almost 2,000. And it had just the name of the film or TV show. And I just spent a long time sourcing everything and then literally just trying to find her.
I saw that at the end of the film, it said like that the clips that you showed were only like 5% of what she gave you, really. How did you choose the ones that you wanted to like put into the film? Did she like kind of tell you, oh, I think it'll be best to showcase my appearance in one specific film?
No, no, I mean, like it was two things. There was first what I decided to even look through because I couldn't look through completely everything. So I started with just what was best available quality. I looked through pretty much all the films that she was in, and there were obvious ones where you just like you knew the name or it was something famous where I'd be like, I have to look through that. And so there was that, and then it was like, I guess just the evocativeness of the footage then and how well it displayed certain things, or when you found patterns like the nursing, like the dancing, then you realize that this might be something more, and so you'd collect all those together. um but in terms of then what I decided to put in the film from what I'd found, created a sort of searchable library for myself, and it just became sort of intuitive what I'd use. There were things where I knew was unlikely to use if the footage was really bad quality, and if it felt like a poor example. Charlie was actually like an old friend from when we were like teenagers, and we'd done like creative stuff before. We collaborated before on like little amateur things, and then when I was just finishing my degree at university, and he was working as sort of a film writer at that point, and um, was trying to get a film off the ground that was sort of related to his work as a writer and a critic. Um, and that's when he asked me to, yeah, if I wanted to produce. So that's how we knew each other. And then Catherine came on board that same project. Um, Charlie had known her through film writing as well, and she came on as a script editor, but then continued to work very hard on it, and so she sort of became a co-producer on that. And then after that project, we sort of all just spoke together and said that we'd enjoyed the dynamic of working together, and um, wanted to set some. I think it was a necessity to set up a company because it meant that then we could um, get commissions, or we could have a bit more control if we were doing a collaboration or working with another organization. It's been primarily driven to be a vehicle for our own creative projects, although we do collaborate with other people in different ways at times. But yeah, that's the main kind of reason for it. It's not been a big money spinner, and we all take we all take work outside of it as well. I think especially over here, like there are a lot of kind of lonely filmmakers and you know independent directors and independent producers who sort of drift around and can feel a bit isolated. And so I think we're very lucky to have this kind of unit, and we're quite fluid in the way we work as well, in terms of we all produce each other's films, and we kind of play to our strengths, as well as like a versatility in trying to do as much as we can in house and save money on certain just little things that we can we can figure out how to do, and then that we don't have to have a huge line in the budget for little technical things. So yeah, that's kind of how we work. We definitely don't always always agree creatively, but it tends to be pretty nuanced, pretty
Mhm.
small things. Um, we respect whoever's brought the project to the table and is leading it, I guess. So who's directing it generally. Um, so as much as producers, we might fight for certain creative choice in it, ultimately, I think we respect that the person who's leading the project has the final say, unless we like, I mean, it's not happened, I don't think, but unless we really didn't want our name on it or something, like that would be like quite extreme. We have a versatility in terms of, oh, you're doing getting what someone's going for, even if it might not be the same thing that another one of us might ever do. But if you can see it along the same lines they see it, then even those creative differences are kind of all in pursuit of the same thing. You're going, no, but I think this will achieve those aims better if it's this way. So yeah, I think that ultimately we are always hopefully going in the same direction when the project's underway, but we have a lot of discussions about what direction that is. And maybe some honesty about like, oh, okay, like it's that kind of thing. Maybe I prefer, like it wouldn't be the way I'd go about it. But generally, like we do really like each other's work and sensibilities and chime well, Um, so I think in that respect, it works.
So, in what ways would you say that Charlie and Catherine really like almost bolster your creative channels, and how has that impacted your creativity as a filmmaker? How have you seen that apply, like their strengths, like help you, and how has that sort of supported your way through the film industry?
Yeah, loads. Like it's to be honest, there are a lot of little things like they're both professional writers. I'm not really. So if there's ever things like that, it can be helpful. I can write, but it takes me a really long time and I don't enjoy it very much. The main thing really is just having a sounding board for when you're stuck on things and being able to bounce ideas off someone who you trust creatively and who can come back and kind of suggest things. And sometimes, often, those might not be what you'd want, but it's just the conversation itself it can always really shine a light on and change the way you're viewing the problem. I would say that's the most um, helpful thing, as well as just having a practically support with doing certain things. Promotional aspects. Like Catherine's also very good at the way that a project could be couched in order to help get it out there, or dealing with press and things like this. So yeah, there are these little different strengths that where we kind of come into our own or whatever. When I'm producing their projects as well, I guess like as I do music and things like this, like sometimes thoughts about sound or will come up a lot more, or so there are little differences in terms of that, but yeah, it's a good way to work, I think.
So you would say that one of your weaknesses is writing, and they would almost almost, I mean, I know with some of your films, what I've seen, it's more just like kind of combining these like archives, so you don't really need as much writing, right?
I don't feel super comfortable. It depends on the kind of writing as well. Like um I mean, often what I'm thinking about now, where I've sought help, is like, I don't know, pitches and like, because there's all this stuff behind the scenes of just trying to get funding for things, and like and stuff unrelated to what ends up in the actual work. It's also, with that, it's not even necessarily the writing. It's like the knowledge that Catherine and Charlie might have about the kind of thing that fund or whatever is looking for, or what's more likely to kind of land, or yeah, it's things like this which are the tiring aspect of of this industry. I mean, the idea came from experiencing those auditions. Because I was part of a very briefly, I was part of a commercial casting agency. I was rubbish. I didn't get anything, but the auditions were very surreal and strange. And you go in, and they would maybe not be very clear on what was going on or how it was working. And so that as a device, I thought was an interesting way to explore certain themes. In terms of the message, I guess it was environment where you sort of feel like you have to perform a certain way and fulfill a certain thing, and you're just about like focusing on, you're just navigating that. And I think that, the parallels in terms of just dealing with structures in life and how you go about interactions, is there was something in that I thought was kind of interesting. But I guess, in the case of the gallery, it's like it's sort of a passive system. There's not really actually anyone really pulling strings there. It's just sort of laid out. And so I suppose there was an element of just kind of being interested in sort of society and how we inherit systems, oppressive or confusing or deceptive systems that then we go through the kind of motions with because of kind of what's expected of us or what's expected of various different people in various different parts of that system. So yeah, I think that was the kind of, without there being like a really, really like specific message, that was kind of the broad like exploration. I'd say the idea for that originally was like more just almost gimmicky. It was like, oh, a character who runs between each films or whatever. But once I actually watched all of Doris Day's filmography, it became something quite different because I'd felt like I'd studied her field of body of work, and it became a little bit more thematic about the archetypes that she played and kind of the structure that she was sort of within that kind of studio system, and the chances she had to kind of the extent to which she was able to stray away from that archetype or not. So that ended up being the kind of the theme that the thing was built around. Again, probably not super consciously at first, because I was just kind of still playing with the footage when I started making it, and was still thinking kind of just along the gimmicky line of like, oh, it'll be Doris Day going from film to film. But by that point, I had soaked in, all her performances and had picked out certain things, and I think it then became something a bit more like about that kind of archetype that she was cast as again and again and again. It's pretty blunt. It's like just punching in, zooming in, and then showing you where she is. But in the context of the film, that's also familiarizing you, or hopefully familiarizing you with the whole concept of what you're watching. So then it became a case of balance, I think, a little bit of assuming where someone's level of familiarity would be at that point, and how eagle-eyed you would be, and how able to pick her out at a certain point, because obviously in the searching that I did, I became very able to spot her. I became very familiar with what she looked like and how I could find her even when she was a bit of a blur in a corner. So I wanted to preserve some of that without it always punching in really hard and like really making it really, really obvious. So it was a balance with these sort of editing techniques where allowing it to feel more natural as it went on. I think once you were familiar with her, that you would then just do that work kind of automatically. but it was a tricky thing to guess because it felt a little bit of a blinkered process because I couldn't unsee Jill when I once I knew where she was, obviously. So knowing that other people are going to be seeing that footage for the first time and not know where she was took a bit of guesswork in terms of where it might land. And everyone's different. And so there are still some people who watch maybe half the film before even realizing what's going on. And there was one instance of someone I spoke to who watched the entire film and didn't work out the correlation between any of the clips. um, so you just don't know exactly how. So it's at the end of the day, like it is an avant-garde short film, so it's like the experimental. There's gonna be like different ways that people are gonna view it, but that's kind of okay. To some extent, I would say. That's my short answer. I mean, that's a huge question
Yeah.
that has been and actually, funnily enough, my one of my collaborators, um, Catherine, did a video essay about called Guilt-Free Pleasures. It's like an hour long. I can send it to you if you're interested. It's which most of the film is about the idea of the guilty pleasure in cinema of like, oh, so bad it's good type thing, and like scrutinizing that and like, and is that, you know, what does that mean? But the later part of the video essay sort of goes into other ideas of guilt, and it goes on to this idea of like separating the art from the artist. And uh yeah, her analysis is better than whatever I would say now. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's tricky. I mean, if you mean artists who have done deplorable things, it's hard. I think sometimes it's really obvious if the work is bad, then it feels like easy to just write off. If it's maybe like got something technically good, but you feel kind of the moral issues in the work itself, then again, it's kind of maybe easy to write off. I think if the work doesn't feel like it has those moral issues, and yet you know that the artist does, that's trickier. I guess my view is that with historical works that are not present, then I'm kind of I feel like you can separate it. I think maybe it's harder when it's present because it's maybe your consumption of that art might directly um, benefit the person or allow them to, you know, create, more, and that's more complicated, I think, maybe. So for me, maybe the separation is along those lines, but I'm not sure. It's not something I'm super settled on. Is that even answering the question you asked?
You answered it in a different way than I really perceived the question. Everyone has a different, interpretation of the question. How I applied it to Jill, it kind of was like thinking of, Jill as a person herself versus how she's viewed within the film industry. I know in The Guardian they mention how she couldn't even look Tom Cruise in the eye. And I was thinking about how like in my drawing, me and my friend, we made a face. One side of the face had one eye closed and the other side had the eye open. And then in the drawing, you can see that the eye open was looking at a person with a face, and then the other eye closed, not even looking at a person without a face. And we sort of try to interpret it as a universal view to the question as the role that they're in.
My answer was something like completely unrelated to Jill Uncredited because it was more about like
Yeah.
moral in terms of um
Morality.
yeah, very much right or wrong from the creator's point of view. I guess in a way that's what the film's trying to do, is to try and think about, yeah, subvert the role and say like, yeah, be like, even though by definition, Jill is a background actor and is her role is in the background. There's a whole life there and a whole,
Yeah.
there's and everyone's been in the background of other people's lives before, and that distinction between the main character and the background actor is much more blurred. Oh God, that is complicated.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in a really long time, so I might not stand by this, but I Dancer in the Dark impacted me a lot when I saw that, but that was a long, long time ago. Dogtooth, I like a lot. I think maybe influenced the interest in certain themes that
Hmm.
I've been kind of interested in terms of like confusion and structures. Yeah, I'm not super satisfied with the answers I've just given, but I
Fine.
think I'm gonna have to leave it at
Yeah.
that. Maybe I just don't have a favorite film.
Be directors or producers. I know you're a director and producer, but other directors and producers who maybe you've looked up to in the past.
Yeah. I mean, I used to be very into like Lars von Trier. I'm less
Hmm.
preoccupied with. Um, uh, Michael Haneke, Jonathan Glazer. Very interested in Claire Denis, although I need to watch much more of hers. But Beau Travail is amazing. Yeah, I can't offhand think
That's
of
fine. Yeah.
much more, but I'm going to kick myself for this probably because there'll be like more things come to mind.
Um,
Um,
I know I
but
said I
yeah.
had no more questions. I just thought of this right now and I was just kind of wondering. I'll be done after, I promise. But I know that
Oh
you're
yeah.
you're part Chinese. Are you like 50%? How much are you? I just
Yeah, I'm half Chinese,
Chinese.
ethnically. But my dad's like Chinese Canadian, so he was
Yeah.
born in Canada, but yeah, I'm half Chinese.
Do you have any like I don't know, Asian film maybe like individuals that you maybe look up to or are inspired by? I don't know. I was just wondering.
Oh right. Uh Edward Yang uh is great. He's not alive anymore, but yeah, his
Cool.
films are, are very interesting. Yeah, I'd say.
Okay.
Like I could there's probably more
Yeah.
again, but I'm gonna end up doing what I did just a second ago.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Who is the person like as your profile picture on Instagram? Is she like I saw it.
oh yeah, that is Anime Wong. I really recommend a film called Piccadilly, which
Oh.
is really old. It's from 1929. It's a silent movie.
Mhm.
Uh, and I saw that in an old cinema in London, and I was really blown away by it. And yeah, there's some stuff of its time, and there's a lot of talk about the way that she was used as a stereotype, but I actually kind of broadly disagree with those criticisms in the context of this film because I think it's about her playing the role. I don't know.
I'll do some research on them. They sound really interesting. And
Yeah, I really recommend
yeah.
uh watching it.
No one to talk with, all by myself. No one to walk with, but I'm happy on the shelf.